The fat man's fingers coiled into a fist, and all his chins trembled. My son Wendell came to the twins a guest. He ate Lord Walder's bread and salt, and hung his sword upon the wall to feast with friends. And they murdered him. Murdered, I say, and may the Freys choke upon their fables. I drink with Jared, jape with Simon, promise Rhaegar the hand of my own beloved granddaughter. But never think that means I have forgotten. The North remembers, Lord Davos. The North remembers, and the mummer's farce is almost done. My son is home. Something about the way Lord Wyman said that chilled Davos to the bone.
A chapter filled with both history and huge implications for the future of the story? Yes, please, and give me more. I'll take seconds, thirds, fourths. My appetite for this could challenge Wyman Manderly's appetite for, well, just his appetite in general. The chapter starts with awesome Stark/Northern history, some history of the area, and of House Manderly, who, of course, don't originate in the North, so that makes them extra interesting. Then, with that history as a key element, we see what House Manderly's plans for the future are, and why, and how. But while history is interesting and fascinating, obviously we focus on it quite a lot, memory is more powerful. Memory isn't just a series of interesting facts and stories. Memory includes how we feel, and the emotions attached are part of what makes certain things more memorable. The strongest memories are those that include the strongest feelings. In this case, the fall of House Stark, though physically complete, is not complete as long as memory holds. And we all know that the North remembers, don't we?
Welcome back to History of Westeros podcast. The podcast is brought to you by our patrons, especially this episode, which is available to donors and patrons only for about a year or so. We'll eventually release this episode to the public, but who knows when that will be. In particular, thanks to Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' first sword, Lord Mark of House Joseph, the Snow and Winterfell, rider of Mazalacartho, a white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons, Talanis the Talon, king of Gagossos, rider of Talarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black, looking good with fresh new art from Azani, check that out, looking fierce. Jinx of House Lier, Green Queen of the Rainwood, rumored daughter of a woods witch, rider of Erogenia, a sylphic albino dragon with amethyst eyes and opalescent wings. Don't forget to join our new Facebook group, History of Westeros, on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, click on groups, and look for History of Westeros. You'll have to answer questions to get in, just so we know you're not a bot, but the questions are really easy. Each of our episodes is divided into sections. Each of these sections is given a name that I come up with. We've been doing this for a long time, but I never explained it, so, well, there you go.
So as you can see, I'm well equipped thanks to Sanrixian, our artist and patron supporter, with her North Remembers shirt that I've got on here. How perfect is that? Obviously, a title that matches the shirt. We usually don't have something on point so perfectly. The excellent website Tower of the Hand conducted a poll where voters could rate each chapter on a 1 to 10 scale. That's all the chapters, not counting pre-released The Winds of Winter chapters, though. There are 344 chapters in the A Song of Ice and Fire books. Whew. All right, hold on a second before we go any farther. 344. Damn. Yeah, no wonder we never run out of material, especially considering 344 chapters doesn't include the extended material like The World of Ice and Fire. That adds, the equivalent of many, many more chapters. There are millions of A Song of Ice and Fire readers out there, and to be fair, Tower of the Hand's poll didn't scratch a tiny fraction of that number. But still, it's really meaningful, and I'm positive it's fun to see how these scores came out. The number 1 rated chapter in A Song of Ice and Fire, according to this poll, out of 344 chapters, is none other than Davos IV, A Dance with Dragons, a.k.a. the North Remembers chapter, a.k.a. the chapter we're talking about now. This installment of Aziz First chapter. And it's not even a long chapter. Like our last installment, the A Feast for Crows prologue, that is a full 2 manuscript pages or 2 Google Doc pages longer. So quite a lot longer. That's probably a couple thousand words. This is one of those rare chapters that's known by a nickname. Some are known by their uniqueness, like the Melisandre chapter, because there's only one. Or the Kevin epilogue. Same thing, there's only one. In the fandom, this is known as the North Remembers chapter. And that's a major designation because such an important phrase like that, you've got to be a special chapter to earn a name like that, right? Or even earn a name at all. Most of the times it's just, you get referred to as something else. Or just called by their number, like Sansa 2, or, Arya 4 or something like that. So why is this chapter so highly regarded? That's the first question that we start with. Well, we'll be answering it throughout. That will come as this episode unfolds. But it starts with Davos down in a dungeon, which is something entirely not new. We've seen characters in dungeons plenty of times, and while the history of this particular site is interesting, the dungeon itself, nothing too special about it. You could say that most of the other dungeons are more interesting, and we've seen a lot of them. Heck, we've seen Davos in a different dungeon before. Despite that, this is a major aspect of what makes the chapter great. And since it's where the chapter begins, so shall we.
The Wolf's Den.
The worst part is not the dying, it's not knowing when or how. He had seen the inside of a few jails and dungeons in his smuggling days, but those he'd shared with other prisoners, so there was always someone to talk with, to share your fears and hopes. Not here. Aside from his keepers, Davos Seaworth had the Wolf's Den to himself.
One of the elements of the real world that is reflected in A Song of Ice and Fire is that death doesn't always fit neatly into a narrative. People die suddenly, without warning, and without a chance to say farewell. That's how it works, in real life and in books. An exception, though, and there are a few, is when you're condemned to die. Like a death sentence, like Davos has in this case. At least you have time to see it coming. You have time to think about your own pending ending.
Death in slow motion.
So we return again, as we so often do, to the literary concept called the human heart in conflict with itself. Facing danger is one thing, and a writer like George R. R. Martin can really capture the terror and uncertainty that comes with, battle. One of the something that happens a lot in A Song of Ice and Fire. And the notion of death can come suddenly is truer than ever in a battle. Though I suppose you can't claim the without warning part. You're in a battle. Someone dying there is not surprising. The battle isn't certain death. It's just not unlikely. There are obviously plenty of people who have fought in a lot of battles and lived to die of natural causes later. It happens, right? Some people die in their first battle. Some people survive many battles. A person facing execution, on the other hand, death appears to be certain. That makes Davos' time in the Wolf's Den unique. He knows he's going to die. That's his reality. I mean, he's wrong, but at this point he has little reason to doubt it. Lord Wyman seemingly meant what he said when he condemned him to the chopping block. And the reader doesn't know this either, at least not in the first read anyway. And the execution doesn't come immediately, so Davos is alone, as the quote reminds us. Alone with his thoughts. He's given pen and paper, and despite everything is thankful he learned to read and write. This death in slow motion, as we've called it, gives us deep insight into Davos' character. And we already know Davos pretty well, but in this case, he writes letters to his surviving sons and his wife. They're very touching, making his complete and total reversal of fortune shortly after all the more relieving. After feeling Davos' sorrow, hearing "the North remembers," it hits really hard, because it isn't just a moment of yes for the Starks. It's like, yes, the Starks are getting something. It's also a relief for Davos, a beloved POV character who appeared to be in a really tough spot.
A bloody history.
Two of the men in charge of his prison are of particular interest. The first is Sir Bartimus, a knight who lost his leg while saving Lord Wyman's life at the Battle of the Trident. Right there you say, oh, well, Lord Wyman fought in the Battle of the Trident? Yeah, he did. He was a bit of a warrior back in the day. Sir Bartimus, however, we're talking about him. His reward was the Wolf's Den, this place, this prison. And he's one of these somewhat uncommon northern knights, even more uncommon because he's not from a house that came north with House Manderly when they fled the south. Davos asks him which gods he worships, and the answer is a lot more than he expected.
The old ones.
When Sir Bartimus grinned, he looked just like a skull.
Me and mine were here before the Manderlys. Like as not, my own forebears strung those entrails through the tree.
I never knew that Northmen made blood sacrifice to their heart trees.
There's much and more you Southrons do not know about the North,
Sir Bartimus replied. He was not wrong.
A prison with such a dark history might not seem like a place one could love, but Sir Bartimus? Well, I told you he was of particular interest, partly because of his particular interest, or lack thereof.
Sir Bartimus had no interest in the world outside, or indeed anything that had happened since he'd lost his leg to a riderless horse and a maester's saw. He had come to love the Wolf's Den, however, and liked nothing more than to talk about its long and bloody history. The den was much older than White Harbor, the knight told Davos. It had been raised by King John Stark to defend the mouth of the White Knife against raiders from the sea. Many a younger son of the king in the north had made his seat there, many a brother, many an uncle, many a cousin. Some passed the castle to their own sons and grandsons, and offshoot branches of House Stark had arisen. The Grey Starks had lasted the longest, holding the Wolf's Den for 5 centuries, until they presumed to join the Dreadfort in rebellion against the Starks of Winterfell.
A cadet branch of the Starks. Whoa, that's cool. A cadet branch of the Starks joining with House Bolton. Whoa. Very interesting. So many questions I have about that. Was this opportunism? Houses don't often just join wars on a whim, especially rebellions against, a house that's been in charge for thousands of years. So one would think the Boltons knew the Grey Starks would be with them when they rebelled. They certainly had proximity. Did House Bolton, say, offer to make the Grey Starks Lords of Winterfell as vassals to the Dreadfort in exchange for their support? Did they offer a marriage pact as part of the deal to make sure neither side backed out? That's a common enough thing. We don't know of any Bolton-Stark marriages in the past, but perhaps there was a Bolton-Grey Stark marriage to seal this deal. And maybe the rebellion was justified. It's easy to think, the Boltons doing Bolton things, but there's a long history of the North here. We know that there are plenty of Stark kings that were real pieces of work. Surely there were a few Boltons, at least, that were decent people. Well, maybe not, but I would guess so. So maybe the Starks were just being really jerky, and like the Stark in Winterfell at this time was a tyrant wolf of some kind, so it was more of a justified rebellion. We don't know, though. Either way, though, a bloody history, as the quote says, seems to be very accurate. I can totally see it. We've got raiders from the sea, and they sound like Andals from Andalos before the major waves of migration came to the Vale. But maybe not. It could be some other people. My guess would be Andals, but I don't know for sure. Whoever they were, it didn't go well for them.
Then a long, cruel winter fell,
said Sir Bartimus.
The White Knife froze hard, and even the firth was icing up. The winds came howling from the north and drove them slavers inside to huddle round their fires. And whilst they warmed themselves, the new king come down on them. Brandon Stark this was, Edric Snowbeard's great-grandson, him that men called Ice Eyes. He took the Wolf's Den back, stripped the slavers naked, and gave them to the slaves he'd found chained up in the dungeons. It said they hung their entrails in the branches of the heart tree as an offering to the gods. The old gods, not these new ones from the south. Your 7 don't know winter, and winter don't know them.
So after that, you can say, wow, okay, a bloody history? Maybe that's even an understatement. Dang. I can see why he's proud of the place, though, despite how dark it is. I mean, Sir Bartimus, as far as Northerners go, there's Starks that lived there, and the Starks are revered. It's a pretty important historical site. And it's an easy and safe place to be, right? It's in a city. It's not, White Harbor, as far as I know, has never been conquered. So it's a lot. There's a lot to be said for that. So that's Sir Bartimus and his creepy but important and awesome history lesson. It seems to be a miniature community he's in charge of here. There's a couple other people there. There's 2 washerwomen, 6 guards, a cook, and 2 jailers. And we meet both of the jailers. Thery is a 14-year-old boy, kind of young for a jailer, but as Davos points out, there's not exactly a lot of prisoners there. It's not a tough job, I suppose. He's actually the son of one of those 2 washerwomen. So like I said, it's a really close community here. And his mother is sleeping with 2 of those 6 guards on different watches. And he expects that eventually one of them will figure it out and then they'll fight over her. So he's not looking forward to that. He's also curious about the smuggler's life. He asks Davos a lot of questions. It sounds like he's a pretty good person to keep Davos company because Davos is kind of lonely and this kid's just asking him to talk and tell him about his life. So that seems to be a good thing to have if you're stuck in jail. But the other jailer, not so much. Not the kind of guy you want in your presence under any circumstances, really. His name's Garth, and he constantly refers to Davos as Dead Man.
His years as a smuggler had given Davos a sense of when a man was wrong, and Garth was wrong.
In this sense of the word, wrong, he's referring to personality. But he's also literally wrong. Davos is, of course, not going to be executed. He's no dead man at all. Words are wind, but Davos is still really uneasy around this guy. He describes awful torture he's inflicted on other prisoners, including lighting a metal rod till it's red hot and touching people's genitals with it. I mean, eesh. He also has a gigantic axe named Lady Lou that he tells Davos will be the axe to take Davos's head and hands. I had said there was little reason for the reader and Davos to think Lord Wyman was lying. I didn't say there was no reason. I mean, lying about the execution there is. A reader might guess for, say, story purposes that Davos isn't going to be killed off here or in this particular manner. But in terms of Davos himself, the actual character, he doesn't have that sort of meta perspective on the story that he's in. He's got a few things out of place, though, that give him a little bit of a clue that something is going on. He takes note of a few strange things. Wyman's, for example, when condemning Davos, says, "I won't eat another bite until the smuggler's been executed." But then days go by. And you know, Wyman's not fasting. So what's the reason for the wait? And Davos is also given particularly nice food, not prison fare, really nice food, something Garth comments on. Davos finds it odd too, but it doesn't lead him to suspect the truth as far as his POV reveals.
A mummer's farce.
When Davos first arrives at White Harbor, in his previous chapter, he's met by Sir Marlon Manderly, a man with a haughty manner, who refers to him as Smuggler. That's just the name he gives. He doesn't call him Davos or Sir Davos. He just calls him Smuggler. Obviously, it's not meant as a compliment, but it's easy to miss how charged that word is in this setting. Because we're used to hearing Davos called Smuggler. It's just really normal. But this is White Harbor, a port. The Manderlys have been ruling here for 1,000 years or so. Smuggler is about as bad as an insult as one can imagine from such. Say kinslayer or traitor, which is about as bad as it gets anywhere. Like the Umbers hating wildlings, or the wildlings hating the Night's Watch, the Manderlys hate smugglers, right? That's just the thing. Smugglers are sort of the bane of the existence of people who run ports. So with this in mind, it's no wonder the mummer's farce the Manderlys put on at court did such a great job of fooling Freys and readers and Davos alike. Of course the nobility of White Harbor, who have grown rich and literally fat off of port taxes, hate smuggling. This is what the Manderlys have been their entire existence. Even when they lived back in the south, they lived on the Mander, the river, and they surely dealt with river smugglers there too, and almost certainly hated them then as well. Now, not all smuggling is done by ship, but of course ports are where they are the most hated, at least by those in power, since the entire point of smuggling is to avoid taxes or laws against certain goods, i.e., whatever's designated contraband. For example, it's illegal to sell weapons to the wildlings, and taxes don't have anything to do with that. That's just, don't give weapons to the enemies. Don't give weapons to the enemies of the realm who are going to come and use them on, the small folk and lords and ladies of Westeros. Well, the ones in the north anyway. Davos knew a man executed for doing exactly that, selling weapons to the wildlings. So, despite the clues suggesting something is off with Davos' own execution, it's easy to see why Davos saw himself as doomed. But he learns the truth soon enough. Well, truths. There's several truths to be revealed here. It's part of what makes this chapter so great, all the surprises. After all the history and soul-searching, Davos comes to understand that he's not actually heading for the chopping block, but he doesn't yet know why. He doesn't fully trust what's happening, despite the reprieve either. He's still got some reservations. There's some trust building needed here, and a lot of confusion to clear up besides. The two kind of go hand in hand. And the man who first comes to get Davos out of his cell, he's not a Manderly, nor a Manderly vassal, and he's a big part of this trust building.
Glover, your seat was Deepwood Mott. My brother Galbart's seat. It was and is, thanks to your King Stannis. He has taken Deepwood back from the Iron Bitch who stole it and offers to restore it to its rightful owners. Much and more has happened whilst you have been confined within these walls, Lord Davos. Moat Cailin has fallen, and Roose Bolton has returned to the north with Ned Stark's younger daughter. A host of Freys came with him. Bolton has sent forth ravens, summoning all the lords of the north to Baratheon. He demands homage and hostages, and witnesses to the wedding of Arya Stark and his bastard Ramsay Snow, by which the Boltons mean to lay claim to Winterfell.
Davos is facing a whirlwind of reveals here, so it's kind of easy to see why he might not believe all of it, and why he's sort of trying to take it all in, and not just rush to judge and understand it. It's a lot to understand at once. But Robert Glover gives a lot of credibility to what Lord Wyman says, because House Glover owes a debt of gratitude to Stannis for liberating their home. And that's a pretty big deal. But it's not enough by itself. What Davos saw before being imprisoned was House Frey, the hated and dishonorable House Frey, being given favorable treatment, marriages, and honors, all while telling ridiculous lies about the Starks, lies that Lord Wyman appeared to accept. So step one for gaining Davos' trust is undoing all that, explaining all that. Why were you guys being friendly to the Freys?
Tar and onions and revelations.
Your head and hands were mounted above the Seal Gate, with your face turned so your eyes looked out across the harbor. By now you are well rotted, though we dipped your head in tar before we set it upon this flight. Carrion crows and seabirds squabbled over your eyes, they say.
They killed a criminal who looked close enough to Davos and the tar as it did when Theon was disguising the Miller's sons to make it look like Bran and Rickon. It made it easy for people to see what they expected to see. They're told, hey, this is Bran and Rickon. That's what they saw. They had no reason to doubt it. In this case, it's very similar. They jammed an onion in Davos's dead mouth, non-Davos's dead mouth, that is, fake Davos, and that makes the face even more distorted, making it even easier for people to see what they expected to see. And of course, they also shortened the fingers to, make it match Davos even more. So this explains the delay in Davos's execution. They used a decoy. The decoy body is how they were able to stash Davos in prison and hide him after claiming he'd be killed. But why? What's the point of stashing him? What's that purpose? Davos suggests that Lord Wyman is taking a great risk here. But Lord Wyman is honest with him. He's determined to be straightforward. Again, he's got to win Davos' trust. And admitting the truth here has that effect, I think. Because he basically says, no, sorry, Davos. If this plot had gone backwards on us, if someone questioned the body, someone said, hey, that's not Davos, we would have killed you anyway. We would have, just to escape, our own lie. So despite Davos hearing, oh, you guys were willing to kill me after all, despite that, it actually does work a bit in terms of getting Davos' trust because it's the truth. And that's the point. They're trying to get Davos' trust, and they're doing it the right way by being honest. He explains that his real driving force here, his priority, beyond his loyalty to House Stark, which is pretty strong, is his loyalty to his own son, his own family. And Davos understands that, and Manderly expects that he will understand that. He's counting on it. He's counting on the fact that a father will do anything for his son, especially his heir, because Davos has sons of his own. He understands that feeling.
I am fat. And many think that makes me weak and foolish. Perhaps Tywin Lannister was one such. I sent him back a raven to say that I would bend my knee and open my gates after my son returned, but not before. There the matter stood when Tywin died. Afterward, the Freys turned up with Wendell's bones to make a peace and seal it with a marriage pact, they claimed. But I was not about to give them what they wanted until I had Willis safe and whole, and they were not about to give me Willis until I proved my loyalty. Your arrival gave me the means to do that. That was the reason for the discourtesy I showed you in the Merman's Court, and for the head and hands rotting above the Seal Gate.
We got to see some of this play out on the Lannister end, so of course we need to compare the different perspectives here. What I mean is that back in Feast for Crows, Cersei 4, she receives word from White Harbor that they've clapped Davos in irons. She replies, telling them to kill him. In her next chapter, Cersei 5, A Feast for Crows, she hears that indeed the Onion Knight's head and hands were mounted and displayed. All of this before the next book, keep in mind. So given all that time to ponder in between A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, many readers were skeptical that Davos was truly dead. For such a character to die off screen is kind of odd enough, especially to have it delivered so casually. But it was hard to be sure for us. For the Freys and the Lannisters, well, it seemed that they had reasonable proof that Lord Wyman had permanently shut the door on Stannis. As, executing someone's hand to the king is rather demonstrative. I'm sure we can all agree. Yes, it's a trick worthy of our trickiest pair.
Varys plus Illyrio equal Wyman?
Yeah, I tried hard to come up with some kind of spider/merman joke. Spy merman? No, doesn't work. A persistent tinfoil theory is that Varys is a merman. Well, I very much doubt that, but I do enjoy seeing Wyman Manderly, whose family sigil is a merman, act like Varys, while looking like Illyrio. Note how this description applies perfectly to either Varys or Wyman. He pretends to be weak and unthreatening, using his appearance to enhance this effect, while also pretending to help a regime he's actually trying to overthrow via a stashed heir most people think is dead. See how all that works? Pretending to be weak and unthreatening. Varys does that. Using his appearance to enhance this effect, he powders and perfumes himself, shaves his head, wears slippers, is extremely non-violent looking. And Varys was pretending to help the Targaryens and Baratheons while actually, planning to overthrow them via a stashed heir. In this case, Aegon. In Wyman's case, Rickon. And in both cases, everyone thinks that person is dead. So really, a lot of similarities there. In Wyman's case, instead of perfumes and powders and such, his weight is his cover story. It's apparently quite out of hand. When Stannis calls him Lord Too Fat to Sit a Horse, he's not exaggerating. Wyman Manderly travels in a litter. So this is by no means a good thing, but he has certainly and definitively turned it to his advantage in more than one way, just like Varys has with his lack of man bits. It's the cover for much of his many deceptions, such as, in this case, slow travel. Traveling in a litter means he has to go slower, which is a convenient and fitting alibi for being nowhere near the Freys when they vanished on the road to Winterfell. Additionally, Davos' time alone with Lord Wyman, despite the presence of so many spies and untrustworthy tongues, is made possible because he's gotten everyone so used to the idea that he needs to spend lots of time on the toilet. Even Lord Riswell, unassociated with this chapter entirely, in a future chapter mentions Lord Wyman's hour-long squats. It's in one of Theon's chapters. Like so much of what we are presented in our time at White Harbor, it's misdirection. So much of what we're seeing turns entirely 180 degrees around. Up becomes down, water becomes dry, White Harbor becomes Black Valley? What's the opposite of a harbor? I don't know. And Davos is disabused of many things he was previously misled on. Learning so many truths at once is confusing enough. Then Lord Wyman goes and says something truly surprising on top of all that.
All this I pledge to do if you will meet my price.
I can bring your terms to the king, but Lord Wyman cut him off.
If you will meet my price, I said, not Stannis. It's not a king I need, but a smuggler.
Recall what I said earlier about people who run ports and their general attitude towards smugglers. Thus, it hits hard that a Manderly is asking for help from a smuggler. It floors Davos, and of course there's a lot of things flooring him all at once, so he's just, what is going on here? It's really unthinkable, but it's also genius, and part of what Lord Wyman is counting on to aid the deception. They all think he's an overweight coward with a depleted army, with a bone-deep hatred of smugglers. This move that he's making is something that almost nobody would predict, even guess. Even if the idea was suggested to them, they'd probably say, nah, he wouldn't work with a smuggler. Also, Davos is aware that Lord Wyman has plenty of able men, and he says so as he struggles to understand so many revelations at once, while still being in the dark about what they actually want from him. So, okay, you need a smuggler, but what for?
You have better men than me in your service. Knights and lords and maesters. Why would you need a smuggler? You have ships.
Ships?
Lord Wyman agreed.
But my crews are rivermen or fisherfolk who have never sailed beyond the Bight. For this I must have a man who's sailed in darker waters and knows how to slip past dangers, unseen and unmolested.
Well, okay, so that makes sense. That clears it up a lot. But from Davos' perspective, it barely narrows things down, and it also makes it sound ominous. What dangers is he going to slip past unseen, and why? Now, to be fair, the danger on the surface may not be the thing that's bothering him too much. Obviously, it doesn't help. But Davos has been in constant danger for quite a while, and he keeps putting himself in danger. He's a hand of the king to a defeated and doomed king, as most people see it. And because he doesn't know yet where he's going, meaning he doesn't yet know that Wyman is going to send him to Skagos, so he doesn't have the fear of the location yet. It just sounds a little ominous. So what I'm saying is that it's not concern for his own life that's driving his reactions here, although it's certainly present. It will be driving his reactions once he learns where he's going. But prior to that, the thing going here for him, I think, is that it just all seems really weird. It's easy to lose track of what Davos does and doesn't know, but when you stack it all up, it's almost all column B. He has no clue what's happening here. He doesn't even know a lot of the basic things that we've taken for granted. And that we need to talk about that for just a minute so you can see just how difficult the situation is for Davos, just how confusing it is. He's very Jon Snow here. He knows nothing. And the few things he does know are wrong or outdated. And part of that is because he was in a cell for so long. We readers have known since A Clash of Kings that Ramsay Bolton burned Winterfell, that it wasn't Theon, and that Theon's still alive. Davos learns both of those things right here in this scene. He didn't know either of those things until right now. He learns that Arya is going to wed Ramsay too. He didn't know that either. He also learns what kind of man Ramsay is. He had no idea prior to this. He didn't know Ramsay does his hunting, his flaying, all the stuff that Ramsay does, all the awful things he's done. Davos hadn't heard of any of that. And it's not any less weird for Davos when they reveal that a crucial element to this plot is intelligence they got on the Stark princes whom Davos thought were dead. But hey, they aren't. And when you need intel on the Stark princes who aren't dead after all, I know you, like Davos, immediately think of mute bastard boys from the Iron Islands. That's who you go to when you need information on dead Stark princes. That's always the first person you should ask, right? Not weird at all.
Wex appeal.
Your own king is dead, Davos reminded them. Murdered at the Red Wedding beside Lord Wyman's son.
The young wolf is dead, Manderly allowed. But that brave boy was not Lord Eddard's only son. Rovit, bring the lad.
At once, my lord. Glover slipped out the door. The lad? Was it possible that one of Robb Stark's brothers had survived the ruin of Winterfell? Did Manderly have a Stark heir hidden away in his castle? A found boy or a feigned boy? The North would rise for either, he suspected, but Stannis Baratheon would never make common cause with an impostor. The lad who followed Robert Glover through the door was not a Stark, nor could he ever hope to pass for one.
Well, right you are, Davos. He's Wex Pike. He can't talk, and he doesn't look like a Stark, but he knows where one of them is. And, well, that's why he's useful. That's his Wex appeal. Wex was Theon's squire. Let's talk about him for a minute. He's important here, and I don't recall spending a whole lot of time on him before, at any point in the past. Pike is, of course, the bastard name for the Iron Islands, and he was born on actual Pike. He's the son of Sargon Botley, who is half-brother to the Lord of Lordsport, which is, like I said, it's on Pike. I guess Sargon wanted to be rid of him, because he kind of forces Theon to take Wex as his squire. Theon was kind of hard up and needed a horse, and that was the price. You can have this horse if you take Wex as your squire. But that actually was a great deal for Theon, because Wex is really useful. You could see why maybe he was looked down on because he's mute, but he's clever. He's a smart dude. And he's with Theon when Theon took Winterfell. He slept at the foot of his bed, i.e. the Lord's bed. And he's the one who figured out that there were no human footprints when they were following the direwolves after Bran's quote-unquote escape to the crypts. He was, however, not there when Theon killed the Miller's boys. He was sent back to Winterfell first, and this saved his life, because all the people who witnessed the Miller's boys being substituted for Bran and Rickon were murdered so that they couldn't later tell the truth that the Stark boys survived. So that was lucky for Wex. And his luck held when he managed to survive Ramsay's burning of Winterfell. All of Theon's men were killed, but Wex hid up in the heart tree's branches. See, smart kid. Being mute, when he's explaining this, he carves a heart tree, with his dagger to show Davos this, to kind of explain it. But Davos at first misinterprets this. It's actually a great moment, particularly in the audiobook, because it's kind of like comic relief. Davos sees this carved heart tree and he says, well, maybe talking to Sir Bartimus about the ancient North had an impact on him, hearing about the old gods and such. And he says, the old gods saved him? Manderly responds, after a fashion. He climbed the heart tree and hid himself among the leaves. But in the audiobook, Roy Dotrice adds a little flair to it. This isn't something he does very often, so it kind of sticks out. He kind of has Lord Wyman respond with just a little bit of shade. He's like, after a fashion. It always makes me laugh. He's basically saying, what are you, crazy, Davos? I think old gods didn't come and say it was a little simpler than that. He just hid in the tree. So Theon is taken captive while his squire escapes. That's the bottom line here. Both of them reappear in A Dance with Dragons. Theon really early on, and Wex right here later in this book, but in much better shape. Clearly. Theon's lost a lot more than the ability to speak. It's interesting that George R. R. Martin wrote Wex as a mute. It's an interesting choice for the character. And it's also interesting that he was able to successfully track Rickon, Shaggy, and Osha without being caught. But since he's been set up as a clever character, I'd say it was sufficiently foreshadow. Not foreshadow isn't the right word, but it fits with what we knew about Wex already. Part of why Roose is a formidable villainous character is his level of suspicion. Wyman has fooled almost everybody, but Roose is still a little bit wary, maybe a lot wary. Despite his insight into Lord Wyman, despite not falling for the feigned weakness, Roose is vulnerable. The Boltons know Bran and Rickon are alive, and they know that if someone produces them, that could cause them problems. And they don't know where Bran and Rickon are. Roose has probably considered the possibility that Lord Wyman does know where, but what can he do about it? Well, he can act first, and that's part of why the wedding is needed sooner rather than later. Roose was able to wait on Stannis and let Stannis' army kind of fade into the snow or be damaged by winter, but he couldn't wait on this marriage. Even though Bran or Rickon's claim supersedes Arya's, that's a legal claim. Lord Bolton isn't going to go against Lord Bolton here, so they can't really rely on a claim later. They need something sooner. Once their Arya, their fake Arya, is in place, then it could come down to war. And the Boltons backing, their own side, you'd think they'd win, given where things are right now. Obviously, that could change. But that's their thinking on the matter.
Roose Bolton has Lord Eddard's daughter. To thwart him, White Harbor must have Ned's son, and the dire wolf. The wolf will prove the boy is who we say he is, should the Dreadfort attempt to deny him. That is my price, Lord Davos. Smuggle me back my liege lord, and I will take Stannis Baratheon as my king.
So they think him weak and cowardly because he's fat, and if, like we've said, he cultivates this image. Roose knows better, but Ramsay and the Freys, and Lady Dustin, and even Davos are among the fooled. So are those people in King's Landing. A lot of people have been fooled by this. And it all means that he's concealed his own inner strength. I mean, it's not all an act, of course. His pallid skin isn't, makeup or a glamour or something like that. He really is stressed and he really is unhealthy. But he knows this and he's playing it up. It's a theme throughout the books. Just like people seeing what they want to see applied to fake Davos having his head mounted. And as we were mentioning in our episode on them, taking advantage of that common human weakness is a bit of a theme for House Manderly in general in A Song of Ice and Fire. I would really like to see Arya's take on Lord Wyman. Someone who sees without seeing, right? Arya might be able to see through all this. Could he fool Varys? Davos is good at reading people and situations too, to be fair, but he's not on their level. The first few pages of this chapter are full of Davos being fooled by the Manderlys, after all. This is important too, not just to show how effective Manderly is at his deception, but to keep the reader in the dark for what's about to happen, as it's about to get super awesome.
The North remembers.
My lord should take up a life of mummery, said Davos. You and yours were most convincing. Your good daughter seemed to want me dead most earnestly, and the little girl.
Did you see how brave she was? Even when I threatened to have her tongue out, she reminded me of the debt White Harbor owes to the Starks of Winterfell, a debt that can never be repaid. Willa spoke from the heart, as did Lady Lyanna. Forgive her if you can, my lord. She is a foolish, frightened woman, and Willis is her life. Not every man has it in him to be Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight or Simeon Stareyes, and not every woman can be as brave as my Willa and her sister Winifred, who did know, yet played her own part fearlessly.
Willa is a popular cosplay, despite what a minor character she is. Green hair and awesome? Well, that story checks out, and our fandom is pretty good about bringing minor characters to life through cosplay. She didn't make it in name on the TV show, but she did in essence via Lyanna Mormont. HBO had Lyanna Mormont blast Lord Manderly for not backing the Starks, and he admitted that he deserved her criticism. This is fairly similar, except, on the TV show, he admits that he deserves a criticism in front of everybody. Here, he admits it in private to Davos. So Willa's parallel book moment is in Davos' previous chapter, and this is Lord Manderly accepting criticism from Davos via Willa after the fact, since, like I said, he can't do it in front of everybody, because that would give up the game.
Hidden strength.
Just as we learn that Lord Wyman's appearance is concealing his inner strength of character, we learn that he's doing the same with his armies. He's projecting cowardice and weakness, but is determined and not afraid at all. White Harbor itself is projecting that it's depleted and not doing much about it. But the truth is essentially the opposite. He's not depleted, not idle. Neither of those things are true.
I have been building warships for more than a year. Some you saw, but there are as many more hidden up the White Knife. Even with the losses I have suffered, I still command more heavy horse than any other lord north of the Neck. My walls are strong, and my vaults are full of silver.
Because of this, because men follow strength, and because Lord Manderly has it, this next part hits hard.
Old Castle and Widow's Watch will take their lead from me. My bannermen include 12 petty lords and 100 landed knights. I can deliver King Stannis the allegiance of all the lands east of the White Knife, from Widow's Watch and Ramsgate to the Sheep's Head Hills and the headwaters of the Broken Branch.
That's some of the best of the North, especially right now, given how war-torn the North is. It's exciting to think how they'll be used and how they'll fare against winter, which they surely know well enough, and the others whom they do not. Remember that a lot of the North is sparsely populated. That's part of what's happening here. And in general, this is probably the most populated area north of the Vale in the North. Relatively speaking, it's a great place to live. It's not as cold as the rest of the North. There's lots of trade with other regions, and there's no wildlings or no Ironborn either, which is something that plagues lots of other areas in the North. Sadly, though, they have had a recent Frey infestation. And they're one of the reasons he keeps this strength hidden. And they've made it difficult on him to keep it hidden.
They watch me, sir. Day and night their eyes are on me, noses sniffing for some whiff of treachery. You saw them, the arrogant Sir Jared and his nephew Rhaegar, that smirking worm who wears a dragon's name. Behind them both stands Simon, clinking coins. That one has bought and paid for several of my servants and 2 of my knights. One of his wife's handmaids has found her way into the bed of my own fool. If Stannis wonders that my letters say so little, it is because I dare not even trust my maester. Theodore is all head and no heart. You heard him in the hall. Maesters are supposed to put aside old loyalties when they don their chains, but I cannot forget that Theodore was born a Lannister of Lannisfort, and claims some distant kinship with the Lannisters of Casterly Rock. Foes and false friends are all round me, Lord Davos. They infest my city like roaches, and at night I feel them crawling over me.
The Freys have strong ties to the Lannisters and the Boltons, so it's easy to see why Lord Wyman doesn't have a lot of wiggle room here. Anything that the Freys find out, probably the Lannisters and Boltons will find out too, or at least that's a risk. But with his son back, that changes. It becomes from little leeway to more leeway, quite a lot of leeway. His son, major difference in this situation here. He no longer has to play Mr. Nice Wyman. Now it's time to beat the Freys. No. Eat, that's correct. Eat is right. Time for pie. 2 slices each of Alvin, Simon, and Theodore. No, Jared, Simon, and Rhaegar. Right. But again, that's a bit later. This chapter is where we're told, sneakily, that if his revenge and plot to restore the Starks were to be seen as a meal, these Freys are the appetizer to that main course. As much as Lord Wyman may hate smugglers, he hates the Boltons even more. And it's not just the Red Wedding, it's Lady Hornwood, who was born of Manderly and tortured by Ramsay. It's what was done to the Starks and Winterfell. He has been patient so far, and will have to remain patient a bit longer, as the Boltons are not in his grasp. Yet. But a few Freys are.
Prepping the Frey pies.
Before Lord Wyman could convince the Lannisters and Freys that he was on their side, they infiltrated his household, making it difficult for him to do anything seditious. This may have backfired on the Freys, though. Their bribing of Lord Wyman's staff and the turning up of, nothing substantial, it may have given them a false sense of security. They checked him out, found nothing, so okay, I guess we can count on him.
The Freys came here by sea. They have no horses with them, so I shall present each of them with a palfrey as a guest gift. Do hosts still give guest gifts in the South?
Some do, my lord, on the day their guest departs.
Perhaps you understand, then.
Translation. Guest right is that inconvenient time when I can't kill guests. But guest right ends upon the giving of guest gifts. Thus, now I can kill and eat them. Other translation, the North remembers. Here, near the end of this chapter, is our first fist-pumping, yes, Starks! Yes, finally the Starks get some revenge. Finally, something major turns their way. A hint of resurgence. Support from someone important, who matters. Someone with power. Someone with a plan. Someone who has his enemies fooled. Someone in a position of strength. Someone who can get the jump on his enemies. But I said near the end of the chapter. The actual end is, well, it's exciting in a different way. It's not a fist pump moment so much as a, whoa, damn moment.
To Skagos.
The chapter delivers Davos from death before immediately delivering him a constant stream of game-changing info. Or should I say Game of Thrones-changing info. George makes us feel for him by putting us in the center of this storm of info, climaxing with a glorious fist-pumping moment of hope for House Stark. Chilling excitement indeed. For us, emphasis on the excitement. For Davos, emphasis on the chilling. And I'm not referring to how cold it is on Skagos, though that definitely doesn't help him feel any better about it. Despite the relief that he's not going to be executed, despite the fact that he now has a clear path to completing a mission that seemed hopeless before he was thrown in a dungeon, despite the fact that his king, whom he's so loyal to, now has a path to gaining a huge, pun intended, ally, huge ally, ha. And we know Davos is a loyal man who really wants to see Stannis succeed, not only because he thinks he's the best man for the job, but because he loves him. Davos loves Stannis, and Stannis badly needs an ally like House Manderly. So his hesitation says a lot. Yet it's understood, isn't it?
For half a heartbeat, Davos considered asking Wyman Manderly to send him back to the Wolf's Den, to Sir Bartimus with his tales and Garth with his lethal ladies. In the den, even prisoners ate porridge in the morning. But there were other places in this world where men were known to break their fast on human flesh.
Questions here. Apart from the obvious, like, what the heck is it going to be like on Skagos? I wonder about minor details, like what ship will he use? Is Wex Pike going to go with him, or anyone else? Robert Glover might go with him, for example, or at least someone loyal to Lord Wyman. Someone to make sure Rickon gets back to White Harbor in case something happens to Davos. We readers know Davos wouldn't just say, screw you, Wyman, I'm taking Rickon straight to Stannis myself. But Wyman might not know that, so I could see him sending insurance against such an eventuality. For more on Skagos, of course, we did an episode on it quite a while ago, but to add to that, if you consider all the plots in progress as of the beginning of the Winds of Winter, this is one of those that the fandom seems to have the least idea of what's coming. Skagos is just that kind of place. Mysterious and scary and old. And despite having done this as long as I have, and with all the people in the community I know, some of whom have been around even longer than me, I don't know anyone with confident guesses on what it'll be like for our smuggler hero when he goes there. We're still no farther than mysterious and scary and old in terms of our understanding. I think the Skagosi will like Rickon, that's something, because he's so fierce. And I could see them appreciating the fact that he has a direwolf, like it's some sort of mark of favor amongst the old gods, which you'd think would maybe matter more in a place that's so mysterious and scary and old. And this line of thinking takes us to at least one other thing that we can probably be confident in, something we very often see in the North, something else that's mysterious and scary and old.
Epilogue. The Tree.
Glover led him along a darkened hall and down a flight of worn steps. They crossed the castle's godswood, where the heart tree had grown so huge and tangled that it had choked out all the oaks and elms and birch and sent its thick, pale limbs crashing through the walls and windows that looked down on it. Its roots were as thick around as a man's waist, its trunk so wide that the face carved into it looked fat and angry.
For Davos, this is, well, how about we call it an appetizer, because that's kind of the theme for this episode. That's right, I bet we'll see a heart tree or two on Skagos. I really think so. And the site where the tree is growing will be important, just as it seems to be here at White Harbor. The bloody history of the Wolf's Den is almost certainly tied to this heart tree, and the site may have been chosen in part because of it. Just as we have a Skagos episode, we have a pair of episodes on weirwoods and heart trees as well. Check those out if you haven't. Davos will remember seeing this tree, this Manderly tree, when he gets to Skagos and sees whatever tree he sees there. And its dark history from Sir Bartimus will come back to him. This memory could come as he sees something worse. You know, like a darker, more scary-looking weirwood with a twisted face, something scarier. I don't know. Just use your imagination. It's not hard to imagine how it could be frightening. And he's a southerner, so that won't make him feel any better. It will make him feel no warmer and no more welcome. Instead of slavers, invaders from overseas, and the like sacrificed to the heart trees, will we see Boltons and Freys get this treatment? I don't think Wyman can eat all of them himself. Surely he wants to share them with the old gods, give them a taste. They don't like being left out. And you don't want to anger the old gods, because you know what they say. The North remembers.
Thanks to Ashea for all the video production, video editing, and recordings. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for the video intro. Thanks to Joey Townsend and Jesse Coal for the intro and outro music, respectively. Don't forget that you can shop at Amazon through historyofwesteros.com, and anything you buy through there helps us out. Any purchase you make through that link clicks back to us. Every little bit helps, but nothing adds up like the support of our patrons. Thanks to the mysterious BR, Hand of the King. Thanks to Lady Suzanne Sinistral, the learned, holder of the left-handed Valyrian shears called Penance, Hand of the Beard. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog, and Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Cabethi Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington, Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by Flagship Caraxes and the Bloodstone Fleet led by Flagship Prince Daemon. His captains have recently turned up a trove of relics from Sothorios. Some of the men think the relics could be cursed. Whether that is true or not, time will tell. But the items are undeniably old. Charlotte Auster is Corsair Queen of the Western Shivering Sea, commander of the Briny Fleet, whose flagship is the barnacle-encrusted, violent-hulled Mercenaria. She carries the nacre-inlaid shucking blade Crasslover. She personally slew a sorrowful man sent against her, and flayed his legs with Crasslover. He's sorry indeed. Thanks to Sir Valentin of House DeGen, creator of the Game of Predictions, free Game of Thrones Predictions Futures Market. It's a lot of fun. Thanks to our Blood Riders, Koholkoi, master of the bow called Sunpiercer, and Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt. Thanks to Lord James Inkblade, the Scholar Knight, master of Whisperers. Grand Maester Saria of the Barrows is Cinder of the Citadel. Lord Robert Jacobs is master of coin. Rosie the Clever is master of laws. Lady Direliz of Castle Naki is the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Breadfort. Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood is Lady of Desert Rose. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Ashland Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Weirwood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian steel machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian of the Hidden 100-Acre Weirwood, dual-wielding Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise. Brian the Defender is Lord of the Spearfort and the Freelands, last scion of Clan McCulloch, Strength and Courage. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods, sworn to House Iron Weirwood. Listen for the silence. Connor the Dungeon Master is Lord of Catamount Keep and Guardian of the Smoky Mountain Pass. Lady Baelish is Dark Widow of Harrenhal. Lord Sidney Jesse is the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring. Nevessa the Twin-Hearted is Suspected Skin Changer, is holder of Castle Carahelm. Our King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Fate. Our Queenside Council is Lady Jane of House Celtigar, the Emerald of the Evening, wielder of the Valyrian steel axe Painkiller, Mistress of Sea Eagles, Mistress of Ships. Lady Mai Emerald Eyes is Voice of House Swan, Mistress of Whispers. Elia of Upstate is Master of Coin. Grand Maester M. Elizabeth is middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the Silver and Valyrian steel link. Bold Betha of House Copperhook, Still Waters Run Deep, Master of Laws. Our Kingsguard is commanded by the Smiling Wolf, Lord Commander Stephen Stark, Cartographer of Kings, who earned a white cloak through wisdom and learning as much as skill at arms. Our Queen's Guard is commanded by Lord Captain Commander Haema Helmet, the Sellsword Sentinel. Our Beard Guard is led by Lord Commander George the Golden. The History of Westeros Night's Watch is commanded by Lord Commander Daenerys Flint of the Nightfort, avenging the memory of brave Dany. First Ranger Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield. First Builder Patchface of Motley Wisdom, and First Steward Sir Jurian of the Torrentine, called Palewind. Thanks again, everybody. If you want to get a cool Patreon nickname like this, just go to historyofwesteros.com and click on the Patreon links in the right sidebar. If Patreon's not for you, there's lots of other ways to support the show, like the Amazon links I mentioned earlier, and plenty of other things. Just go there to historyofwesteros.com and see what fits you, and we'll see you next time. Valar Reread Us.